We just don't ask the basic questions that would lead us to remembering that we are divine beings incarnate in a 3D reality, that this is a simulation for all intents and purposes. It's a hologram, it's a dream. It isn't real, and not in the sense that the things you do don't seem or appear to have a consequence, or that anything and everything is permitted, but it's not real in the sense that it's not final, it's not total, it's not whole, it's not complete, that you're seeing fragments of the aspect that you're projecting out as a probability in the all that can be, a probability that manifested. We just don't ask the questions that would lead us to the answer that you're all of it, that you're all of it. I thank you for co-creating this moment here on Divine Within with me. This transmission is brought to you by an entity named Lucian, and on Divine Within, we remember the power within, the kingdom within, and that reality bends from within. I'm working in the field of mental wellness in a variety of capacities over the last 7 years. What I have learned, and I probably, if I'm being honest, I think I was going to say that I see it more in those that identify as female than male, but I don't even think that's accurate. I really do think it, and I'm a they them, so I mean, and all others, but I think if we're looking at predominant presentations of typical gender social performance, it just manifests differently. I think that those who identify as male or masculine predominantly have exactly the same challenge that I'm about to introduce for conversation or thought in discourse digitally with you, hopefully to help you remember how to create the good that you desire, because you are the good that you desire. There is no reason you're a god or you are a goddess. You're a divine being. Maybe you're an alien space creature. You are sentience. You are consciousness. There is no reason if we're struggling, and if we're upset, and if nothing's going right, and if it seems like things only get worse, and no matter how much we try, it seems you're taking steps backward rather than forward. If that is the case in your life, then you're using your creative power in a way that has now been weaponized against the self. And I say that with no sense of superiority, because we're conditioned to weaponize our ideas, our concept of the world, our concept of ourselves, the way that we emote, the way that we express, the way that we receive information coming to us. We're trained to filter that all through this hellish lens of separation and of scarcity. So it's no wonder you're living the life that you're living. Something within you brought you here today, and I'm not telling you anything. I'm just a reflection of yourself, and you're just a reflection of myself, and we're just communing here, discussing that if that's what's happening, like you summoned me to remind you, if that's what's happening, then you are weaponizing your creative power against yourself. And that is quite the predicament to be in, and that's the predicament that 99% of us find ourselves in, is that our creative power has been weaponized against us. And in 7 years of talking to people across the spectrum in every way that you can think of in terms of presentation and being on the earth, per particular locale, of course, what I found is that we need to make a distinction between what I would like to call self-concern and selfishness. But what brought you here is because the way I titled it, you need to be more selfish. What brought you here is what you might even believe is that villain awakening in you. And it's not the villain, it's the protective aspect of you that knows you can maximize your capacity to create in this world if you restore power to yourself, because your power has been displaced to all of these seeming fragments of this image, this illusion of reality. You're outletting all of your energy to getting up in the first thing in the morning. You're scrolling, you know, the doom side of doom news and of comparison and of, hey, look what I have, and hey, look what you should buy, and hey, look at what you aren't, and hey, look at what you can be, and hey, like all of this information you're bombarding yourself with. The minute that you even get awake, so of course you're drained. Of course, probably even on a hormonal level, you know, your cortisol levels are high and your adrenaline levels are high, and maybe you don't spend much time in the parasympathetic nervous system. You know, maybe just you're physically drained, you're emotionally drained, you're energetically drained, you're drained of power. And you clicked on this video because you know that if some part of you is remembering something in the signal lined up with this signal, to tell you that if you stopped paying attention to everything everyone's gossiping about. I mean, even your friend that like always has all these problems and is like always going through all this stuff. And again, I talk to people all day. Like, this is what I do. So I understand. Like, I understand it's not as easy as just to cut people off, or nor am I advising that, but I'm talking about being able to listen to somebody with a barrier and with a shield to where their energy does not become your energy. Because do you know that there are people that are siphoning off of your energy? That's another thing. If you were brought here, so we're going to get to what I was discussing, but it's all related. Do you know that there's some people, you know, a person that's always in crisis? There are some people that don't, I won't even say that they don't want to be helped. I mean, and it's all you also. I mean, you're only ever seeing yourself. You're seeing all of this varied, just cacophony mess of yourself on the 3D. But do you know that there's some versions of yourself that are feeding on your inability to have a barrier and a shield around what you prioritize and what you give attention to? And I define attention in the Heaven on Earth Source Codex, which is an anti-system system of instant manifestation. So definitely check that out. That's available to you for free in the show notes, as well as ways to work with me one-on-one. The Dispatch podcast exclusive to Spotify, and thinking quicker than I'm able to speak. The Liberation Chronicle, which is that's native to Substack. So check that out. That's the written word of this platform and Spotify and other stuff. So just look at that. But if that's where you find yourself drained, and if you're dealing with all of these people and you feel like you're responsible, I was talking about attention, but if you're responsible in some way for the outcomes in their lives, and maybe not in a literal logistical way, but in a way where you're wondering and you're hoping and you're concerned about how things turn out for them. Attention, as I defined it, is consistent focus with emotional charge. By that definition, how many things are you giving attention to? A lot. And it's been so repetitive. You've been trained to give your attention, meaning your consistent focus and emotional charge, to a certain frequency of reality that is so self-reinforcing that you don't even realize how emotionally stimulating everything around you is designed to be in a negative way. So of course you're always worried. Of course you're always stressed. You know, it's just an insane idea. I mean, I don't go around, you know, telling people that they're God, and you know, I'm no evangelist, right? You know, I'm talking to who's listening. But I mean, in my daily life, I mean, this is how I speak. This is how I live. You know, I don't use certain words. You know, I'm fairly pretty consistent in terms of like my ideology and how I present myself. While I might not, I guess, always be spouting ideology. You know, I'll be talking to somebody who has no idea about this work, and you know, maybe they're an artist. I just ran into one, and they were talking about finally starting to see some substantial lucrative payoffs from their work, and they were like, I'm starting to feel like I'm invigorated, and it was a beautiful moment. And this is somebody that's not tapped into any of this at all, at least not consciously. And they said, I came back from my trip invigorated. I sold all this art, and I'm starting to believe that this is a possibility for me, that this is something actually that can work out, and that I see this for myself. He said, I see it becoming something. I see myself beginning. And I said, it's already happening. And he was like, yes. I was like, it's already happening. It's already working out. It is here. You are doing it. And then the person that introduced us was like, okay, well, that's just because, you know, you do these jobs, positive thinking. And I said, that wasn't my intention. That wasn't what I was, this wasn't what I was talking about. You know, and the artists that I have met said, no, it's an important perspective to talk about, that we don't talk about this. So like for me, what's so native and what's so normal for me when I'm, you know, out in the wild, as they say, and I'm talking to just standard people about just normal stuff, you know, just success and love and life and business and whatever it might be, and I bring up these topics, I had someone even just tell me that like, oh wow, that's kind of like a crazy way to think, but like yeah, it makes sense. And you have somebody, oh, positive thing, of course it's you, you know. So this is really it's normal for you because this has been brought into your space in your world, but this is um, actually higher level consciousness stuff. I mean, this is not, you know, again, 99% of people are not thinking like this. But talking about energy and talking about power, and we're talking about principle 4 of the Heaven on Earth Source Codex. Everything I have to say is related back to that codex in one way or another, one of those principles. But you came to this video because you realize and you recognize that I need to bring power back to myself. And the way that we do that is we understand and we untangle the misconceptions and definitions that were handed to us as knowledge, that were handed to us as ethics, as morality, as the correct, right, logical way. Like we have to start questioning, like, how did we get here? How did we get here? And where are we going? And if the ways that we got here are not conducive to the ways that we're attempting to go, meaning living your heaven on earth, living and being that which you desire, because babe, you're all of it, then we have to start making some severances. And I'm not telling you anything you have to do. I'm just introducing the opportunity for you to remember. And what you do with that has everything to do with you. But we, you know, if we're to move forward, we have to question how we got here and start untangling. Start untangling again, and what I mean to be some basic weeds. So some basic weeds is that we're taught, and it's like an inversion. It's like an evil inversion, you know. We're generally taught this golden rule of do unto others. Do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And what that leads to, and again, I started this transmission with the idea that I think I've observed it to be more outwardly vocalized, this sense, by those who identify as female, but I think it's operating probably with men as well. This idea that do unto others as I would have them do unto me, so that then that means that I'm giving and I'm depleted all the time. I'm giving all of my energy, all of my attention, all of my everything to everybody all the time, and I'm drained. I listen to my quote unquote, I'm not saying this me personally, just making third person examples, the things that I hear, things that you'll relate with. I love my best friend or my child or, you know, my brother or my sister, they have a sibling, whatever, but they always need my help. They always need my advice. Something is always going wrong. You know, people stay away from people that always have something going wrong. And if I say stay away, maybe limit contact, or at least understand that being around. Now, here's the thing: I'm not talking about walking around with a sense of protectiveness because, you know, your vibration is fragile. You know, there's nothing you're all of it. You know, you're seeing yourself, but if you're around someone who is always negative and is always upset about something, and you're entertaining and engaging and maybe trying to help them fix or help them resolve or be a part of their life in a way that you believe would make them less unhappy or more or feel better, you're engaging in an energy exchange where you are, and again, this is an experience that then you design for yourself because you're only ever seeing yourself, but that you're in this really kind of parasitic relationship where you need to be needed and they need to need, and eventually you're the host of all of this. You're going to end up drained and defeated and upset and depressed and not even know why, and maybe not even connected to that person. So you have to be mindful of the people that you're around, but not in a way where you're like, oh gosh, oh, that's a negative person, oh, they're angry, oh, I have to stay away from that, because it's not about a hyper vigilant type of fearfulness, you know, or panic about the things around you, but it is recognizing that if that's what I'm seeing in the screen of my reality, then there's a large aspect of myself that is participating in and paying attention to those energies that I'm seeing reflected in the illusion and in the shell of somebody else. Which means that there's a large enough energetic coagulate in me to have produced that for me to become aware of on a material level, which means I need to look at those energies in myself and decide and ask myself why I'm holding on to that. Which on a material level, yes, might result in you having less contact with that person or a different relationship entirely with that person, or maybe they leave or they have some transition in consciousness or whatever. It's not about doing anything with them. It's recognizing that you're seeing an aspect of them in yourself. And not to blame yourself for that. And then also realizing that, like, what I've been finding out really recently is that just, reality is glitchy and is weird. And you might see something from 2 years ago that you have that you're not paying attention to, that you don't feel like, it's like, I'm not funneling my attention into those energies. I'm not participating in that reality. I don't relate with that version of myself anymore that created that challenge. Why is it here again? And that can feel really discouraging as well. We're going to get to the main piece of all of this. Why is it here again? Why is it here again? And that can make you doubt the whole manifestation thing, all of this, and think it's just hogwash. If it's been 2 years and I'm still seeing weird stuff from the past, then none of this matters. And no, I mean, I've found that, especially if you spend a long time in a particular consciousness and you move out of that consciousness, and it even looks like a lot of things have changed, and maybe they have changed, like you've changed, the situation's changed, things have shifted, that thing's no longer there, and then it bounces back in again. And I really do just see it as like a ball bouncing. Now you can reach for the ball and try to grab the ball and then figure out, okay, now that I've got the ball, what do I do with the ball? And what I mean by that analogy is that's then you paying attention to it, let it bounce in and let it bounce out, like let it go. Observe that and understand that, like, oh, I don't identify with the version of self that would even participate in that reality. I'm certainly not going to start dedicating emotional focused attention to it. So I'll let that be. I'm gonna let that be, which might mean somebody thinks that you're the bad guy, or there's something that somebody else thinks you should have intervened in, or you should have stopped, or you should have resolved, or you should have argued back, or you're gonna have people around you saying you should have done something about that. Why aren't you fixing it? Why aren't you efforting? And I think that's the people that are even encouraging that kind of interaction with whatever that past instance that is no longer part of your reality, when it bounces in, they're just responding to the energetic resonance of it. Because that's how people get off track. That's the whole thing, is that, not only are we giving all of ourselves to other people, but because we're giving all of ourselves to other people, we've made other people in the external world, in a sense, God, because we've charged all of our attention and all of our will and all of our understanding of self and our willingness to believe in ourselves and our perspective and morality. I mean, really, I keep coming back to that. Morality meaning what should be, what one ought to do per a certain amount of circumstances. We then charge the attention that we are as God into the 3D world, and then believe erroneously that the 3D world is the source, treat that as God, and then we are supplicants. Then we live in consciousness as supplicants, or as the subservient, or as the submissed, as the oppressed, even in this relationship with 3D reality, where we're giving everything to everyone, and because we're giving everything to everyone, we're expecting the world to give us that energy back. But because we've misplaced the power in the first place, we don't get that power back, and we live drained, victimized, defeated, confused, oppressed, anxious, depressed, wondering, trying to figure out why things never work out. If they would just do this, and if this person would just create the situation that where these types of challenges would have never happened in the first place. And then you're going on and on and on. You're getting wrapped up. You're getting tangled up in this web of problems that really started when you forgot that you were the power, giving those things out their power in the first place. So what I see is, when we start to untangle some of these definitions, is that we have to look at the word selfishness, because we've been taught that selfishness is wrong. But again, So then, and I'm, shortcutting, I'm blasting through this. So when we believe that selfishness, generally, most of us, I think most people generally want to be considered good, and they generally want to be considered good because we have this tribal primate brain that wants to be a part of the in-group. We don't want to be kicked out of the tribe. So then again, we adapt the tribe moralities and live our lives based on those moralities, and then think that we are those moralities when really it has nothing to do with you as a self. It has everything to do with what you've been taught a self is allowed to be. And in that teaching of what a self is allowed to be, it's got these this paradigm that defines a certain amount of acceptable ideas, beliefs, behaviors, and goals that one ought to pursue. But chiefly of them is to help one another and is to be present for one another. But oftentimes, because we don't realize that we are gods and that we are the ultimate source of power in our reality, helping people then becomes a way for us to, quote unquote, get our cup filled. And that's not even the right, that's much lighter than I mean. But that when we participate in this giving activity, and we give ourselves to jobs and institutions and systems and families and dynamics and relationships, we give ourselves to that, but we're expecting, it's unconscious, but we're expecting something back from that. So then we end up having this kind of like symbiotic, parasitic relationship to reality. But no one wants to be, for the most part, but I said all that to say most human beings want to be considered good because they don't want to be ousted from the tribe, because they were taught that being good is how you helping each other, being cooperative and conducive to group aims, which is a certain degree of conformity, a certain type of social contract. You want to be good for these reasons. So nobody wants to be labeled selfish. The most selfish people doing the most selfish bullshit, few of them that you can see outwardly, which again is just an aspect of yourself, they don't want to be called selfish. No one wants to be called selfish. No one wants to be called selfish. So regardless of, that's what I'm saying, regardless of what, if we're doing actually selfish things, regardless of, okay, I might go volunteer, but it's really because, and internally, because, I mean, and here's the thing, it's dark in there. How many people, I know this, I talk to people all day. I've been talking to freaking, 8 to 10 people a day for 7 freaking years. Talk to a lot of people. How many of us are actually doing a thing for somebody else simply because we don't want to feel bad about not doing that thing? So that actually this is about me. So actually this is about me because I'm in a paradigm of reality where I've created emotional relationships through which I do good things, but me doing good things has to do with how other people make me feel if I don't do those good things, and I don't want to feel that way that they make me feel when I don't do the good things. So I do the good things to avoid feeling bad, all the while because I've created that whole strange situation of awareness and participation in reality. I must feel bad in the first place, and it never actually leaves. People that come to therapy and they're saying that, I want to stop feeling guilty about this one thing I did. They're not guilty about one thing. They have guilt inside of them. They're guilty. If you get them, talking in several sessions in, they're guilty about everything. It has nothing to do with that one thing that they think they can't let go of because they deserve punishment for it, or for whatever reason, the world wasn't just enough to punish them to the degree that they think that they deserve. No, that has to do with a framework of self that believes it deserves punishment. And then therefore, they're participating in realities, in relationships, in dynamics, and in personal systems of self that then mirror that predominant emotion, that predominant belief, that predominant emotion of grief and guilt, and that predominant paradigm that I deserve to be punished. They're seeing it absolutely all around them. But again, coming back to this idea of selfishness, so we have to understand where we are actually selfish, and we're just not looking at it. That's the first bit of this. But the second bit is to, and I've seen this be so freeing for individuals that I've spoken to on a one-on-one basis about this, is that there's a difference between, and if you're still here, because here's the thing, I guess I could have, I got to set the information up. I could have said this piece just here, this can be isolated in and of itself. So if you're still here in this video, good for you. Good for you. You came to learn something or remember something. I'm not teaching you anything. There's a difference between self-concern, and write this down. There's a difference between self-concern and selfishness. Now, by my definition, and here's the thing, we're still all selfish. Like, we still will all do something selfish between now and the time that you leave this planet, or that you leave this vessel. So we all still can't be selfish, but self-concern is concern for one's self. You must be, this is basic, you must be self-concerned. If you're not self-concerned, who is going to be concerned for you? Now, one thing that I find that's common in individuals that have been traumatized in childhood and are still, are still significantly impacted by that is this wanting and this longing of, like, yes, but don't I deserve care? Yes, but is it unreasonable to expect that somebody should care about me? Yes, but must I do everything in life alone? Must I live in a way that is totally independent and totally supported for myself? What is wrong with the idea of a family? What is wrong with the idea of help? What is wrong with the idea of dependence? Particularly this group of individuals many people have these questions, but I've seen the question come up all the time. I mean, it comes up, that's the first question. It's like, yeah, but so it's wrong to want family. It's wrong to want community, to want interdependence, and even fun. It's wrong to want dependence. And it's like, no, it's not wrong to want dependence, but on a metaphysical level, on a spiritual level, and finding on a lower than mental level, what we're looking at is the idea of self that believes it is only complete, that it's only sufficient, that it's only holy, that it's only loved, and that it's only perfect if all of those things are reflected back through the eyes of another person. If there is a board of approval or a validation or an outward appearance that can then mirror that reality back to me, so then I can believe it. On a metaphysical level, it is never going to be the case that the outside will prove something, that the external material 3D illusory reality will mirror back something to you that you don't already know to be the truth of the version of reality of the self that you're participating in. If you choose to participate in a guilty sense of self, there's no one out there. You might run into these teachings, you might run into teachings or teachers or guides or coaches or therapists that can help you question that guilt. And that's a step along the path. That's a positive step along the path. But if you're looking at a reality, but even so, then, I've seen individuals that maybe are dealing with a deep sense of guilt. And for instance, they have something come up and they miss an appointment, and then they project that guilt onto me and say, you must be so disappointed and all of these other things. And then we have to stop and take a look at the reality that's in the room that's not actually represented necessarily accurately by the two people in it. Because then there's this reality of, like, I'm guilty because I missed, and you're ashamed because I missed, and we both then are participating in this stew of mistreatment, and then I have to stop and help them question, what is the energy that is coloring the perspective in this room? Because I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. So you are living in a reality. I can help you see that you're living in a reality that is leading you to a certain amount of conclusions that perhaps on the outset wouldn't necessarily be the case if you stopped agreeing to that version of reality. But there's a difference between self-concern. So anyway, so back to this idea, like, you have to be concerned about yourself. So I was talking about, like, just all these questions that come up, because it's like, well, is it wrong to want love and to want someone to be concerned about me? No, but if you are not concerned about yourself, you're going to find lovers that reflect back to you your lack of self-concern. That's all I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Help you remember that it all starts with you. You're the power, so you must be concerned about yourself. You must be concerned about yourself. Now, selfishness, and we all have this capacity, I think, is when you take self-concern in a way that begins to weaponize itself or begins to actively, consciously create negative consequences for those in your reality, where you're harming people with your self-concern. Now, and this is all very nuanced, right? Because there are points in time where somebody, let's just say that you have an outing you're supposed to go to, and on a mental level, physical level, in your soul, that you need to spend some time in, and that you need to sleep, and that you need to cancel. you cannot say that those individuals out there have to take that positively. They might be upset, they might be disappointed, but you then have to decide which version of reality you're like. Am I the, and hopefully you're not around people that would immediately think this if you're missing one event, but am I, the terrible person who's a flake and can't commit to anything as they might think, or which again would be a really extreme view to have after, someone missing one thing. Am I that version of myself, or am I the version of myself that takes care of myself? So you could see that, like, on one end you might be having a perspective of self that is reflected back at you that says you're selfish, but you have to discern for yourself, is it selfishness or self-concern? Like, is anybody gonna die? Is anybody gonna die because I'm not, or or unalive themselves because I'm not there? Is the world going to fall apart? Is there going to be a global catastrophe? What did I negatively contribute to in this circumstance? You weren't there. You made a commitment and you didn't show up, and people are going to feel the way they're going to feel about that, which is no then excuse for you to do this consistently, and be an asshat about it, because again, like, when you've crossed that line into that. This is not to say that nobody else's feelings matter, nobody else is real, so screw them. I'm not advocating for that lens on this information. I am just saying that, like, selfishness is an active intent to hurt. It may be not active. It could be unconscious, definitely. Because how many times does somebody say, well, I didn't mean to? And it's like, well, your intent. Okay, fuck your intent. It doesn't matter if you didn't mean to. That doesn't mean it didn't have an impact. So it can be conscious or unconscious, but when your self-concern has, I would say, a moderate to severe, a moderate to severe negative outcome, consequence, effect on someone else. That's what I would call selfishness. But again, there are people that are going to say you're doing selfish things when it really wasn't selfish per se. I mean, they might view it that way, but it was really more self-concern. You have to be concerned about yourself. You have to be concerned about your energy. You have to be concerned about your attention. You have to be concerned about your body. You have to be concerned about your attention, not your attention, your diet. I said attention several times because you do. You have to be concerned about what you're putting into your body. You have to be concerned about the types of things that you think about, and you have to be concerned about the types of things that you agree to in the world, the types of things that are true. Somebody will say, yeah, really having a bad time in the world, and they'll just kind of gesture generally to whatever, and I'll say, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And that's just a small thing. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm not going to agree to, like, a generalized declaration that everything is terrible. And that's just so odd. That's just so common. You walk by, any standard conversation, for the most part, it's people talking about, what they're going to eat, or what's going wrong. Which to me, I consider to be very low level things. And I say low level, not from a sense of superiority, just like, I have no interest in those things. I have no interest in those things because so I'm not going to participate in a reality where those types of things are important to me. And it's not about being a pompous jackass. It's not about, setting yourself apart intentionally in order to make people feel a certain way. Here's the thing, operating out of selfishness consistently, meaning, like, if you're taking from people and hurting people, and for instance, like, playing some type of situation heartthrob game where, you're getting involved with all these people and siphoning, their attention and admiration for you. That's what I'm saying. You're intentionally gaming people. You're doing things to hurt people. If that's what's happening, then you're not in source. Self-concern returns you back to source. It's you paying attention to you. It's you journaling. It's you taking whatever you consider to be self-care or mental health days. It's you not deciding to step out of this whole grind culture bullshit of, I'm going to work as hard as I can every day and work myself to the bone. I mean, here's the thing. If that's the reality you want to create for yourself, great. But, like, that's a version of reality. That's not all of what reality is. The version of reality where I have to, convince people to engage with me in a positive way. I have to convince people to give me what I want. And because I'm always in the stage of convincing, I'm never receiving. So I feel like I'm at the effect and I'm a victim of everything. Like, that's a version of reality you have to choose for yourself through your I ams, your agreements, and your attentions. Your I am, meaning what you declare for yourself on the inside and the whole and the kingdom of all that is which within of everything, if you when you close your eyes and you go into the closet and you go into the inner kingdom and you go into the great mother's womb, and when you go into imagination and when you go into this void space of self, when you close your eyes, the entire majesty of everything is available to you when you close your eyes, not because it's separate, but because separate from the outside, but because everything out there is a rendering of it here. So whatever is happening, so call it subconscious too, call it anything, call it all those names. Whatever's happening in here that is coagulated with the type of energetic density, that's what you're seeing out there. So you have to decide, what version of reality am I going to participate in? But anyway, if you're siphoning and you're taking, you're consistently doing selfish things and hurting people on a consistent basis, and it's that as we ascend and as we move on and as we grow, we're going to hurt the people around us. We're going to hurt ourselves. There's going to be pain, like that's inevitable. But if you're taking, you're not seeing yourself as source. Self-concern is returning back to source and recognizing that, like, if something is out of alignment and it doesn't feel good to me, I have to be concerned about myself enough to think about it, to resolve the problem, to remove my attention, to remove my presence, to think about it from the aspect and the frequency of being solved. That way I can continue to move through this challenge, to learn from it, to transmute it, to alchemize it, and to bring it back in as power to the whole of myself. That's what I owe the things in my life that are causing me problems, not continued participation in the essence and frequency and emotional and attention point of the problem simply because the problem's there. And a lot of people will ask you to pay attention to the problems in their life simply because they're having problems that are there. Again, you have to be deliberate about how much of yourself you can pour into that. You have to be concerned about yourself. You must be concerned about yourself. You must be concerned about yourself, to be selfish. And here's the thing. So then when we're talking about conditioning, right? The only clear, really collective image I think that we have of the person that is selfish, or that is the only thing we can connect to maybe a type of self-concern, is the narcissist. So then self-concern and then selfishness, then they become one definition when they're not one definition, meaning, a type of self-concern that preserves the self and builds the self, cultivates the self. And when I talk about the self, I'm talking about the awareness of self in the context of this meat suit. So the core of what you are, the thinker doing the thinking, the grand genie behind all of it is a spark, the divine spark of the all that is. But it's participating in its own creation and its own rendering of consciousness through your personalized awareness VR headset via meat suit. And then you have a brain and all these senses to be able to make sense and get around this 3D reality rendering of consciousness. But the only version of self-concern really, that we have is this version of the narcissist. So because those two definitions become one definition, because self-concern then looks like taking from other people, which again, if you are giving, and I used to do people pleasing. Like when I first got into like all of this shit, and I was doing mindset work, and I used to do people pleasing coaching, because I had a business coach who said, coach on the first thing that you have ever overcome. And I was doing that. The hardest thing for the people pleaser was to admit was that they were actually selfish assholes, that they were actually pissed when they didn't get the recognition, validation, and respect they feel they deserved from totally emptying their life into the hands of another person who never actually appreciated it. They couldn't admit, so they were, and that was what the coaching was for, and I myself understood it and quote unquote overcame it, meaning recognized the pattern and shifted to a version of self that was no longer in the scope and the touch and the reach of that pattern. So again, it wasn't from a place, like I'm not speaking about it that way because I can be brash about how I speak about things, but that was the number one thing that I noticed, and that was the thing that got in the way of everything else. Because it's like, well, I don't need to work on my communication patterns if I'm a victim, and I'm a victim because I look at it. So here's my long explanation as to like why I did all of these things for this person, and they didn't return any of it. And now I'm even more further abandoned. And let me tell you about this other time where this happened. And again, like all of that's real shit, but at its core, it's selfish. It's not self-concerned, because somebody who is self-concerned would recognize that there's a gross there's a gross disproportion of reciprocity between myself and yourself as two parties, which again, it's all you. It's all you. And I need to remove myself from the dynamic of this relationship, because it is not healthy for me to continue to expend so much energy for someone who expends very little back. And you have to then come back to self. There's other things involved, right? You have to, look at self-respect and look at, why am I wired to do these things? What are the stories, programs, narratives, all that other stuff. But it is actually selfishness that drives us to overgive, not self-concern. Because self-concern, if you were self-concerned, you would notice when you're starting, when your energetic battery is starting to go closer to E and you're still making new commitments. If you were self-concerned, you would know that I can't make any more commitments at this point in time. I need to return back to the space of myself, or my safety, or my sovereignty, or my home, or wherever it is where you can be in a space of self. And then, and I guess I've talked about this before, and people that are parents, or that have large families, or large complexes of responsibility that they have, with interconnected webs of many different people and things and expectations and roles and titles. They say, I don't have 2 weeks to just go to the Bahamas and not care about anybody but myself. And that's not what I'm talking about. You can be self-concerned and run a business, run a successful, busy business where you are booked out and people need stuff from you, and you have a lot of things that you're involved in being the source of, per se, that are tied to you for sustenance. You can be self-concerned and participate in a reality that demands a lot from you, but you have to make yourself a priority. You have to, because it, to me, it's just plainly obvious. To me, it's very simple that if I have all of this stuff that I have to do, then I have to take care of my eye. I have to, not, but selfishness, the selfishness actually within is what tells us that because all of these people depend on me, I have to give and I have to go, because I want them to think something of me, because I want them to have a particular opinion of me, because if I develop a certain reputation for myself, that is going to give me a certain amount of validation, and whatever morsel of approval that I get in terms of energy from that validation, that will pour back into me and give me just enough energy to go on and overcommit myself to even more things, where I can gripe and complain, and somebody can ask me how I'm doing, and I say stressed, but but live in the dream, blah blah blah, everything's negative. I'm at the effect, I hate my life. Which again, these are not things that are conscious. These are I'm making these things, I'm bringing them up from the subconscious, which sub just means under, to the conscious aspect side of things. I'm just bringing that up. It's selfishness that drives us to try to be everything for everyone, because we want to be seen a certain way, because we think in being seen a certain way, then I will receive some type of validation and some type of energy that will allow me to continue on to the next day, until I've just been so numb and so checked out and so automated for so many years that I don't even know myself. That's what a midlife crisis is. You've been giving all of your energy to so many things, and then in a certain way, getting a certain amount of energy and feedback back from the things that you've been giving yourself to, but it's been this parasitic, symbiotic relationship that you can't separate yourself from the things that you're doing. And because you can't do that, you essentially have no concept of self-care. And I'm not talking about bubble bath self-care. I'm saying of how to take care of and prioritize yourself. So you're drained, you're overweight, your finances don't look the way you want them to look. You've got too many things going on and seemingly not enough time, and you're taking sleeping pills and you don't know what's wrong. I see this all the time. Every day. So you have to separate. So because the only vision that we have of self-concern is a narcissist, well, nobody wants to be that. Nobody wants to be that. So then the conditioning says, okay, so keep giving. So keep being available. So keep depleting yourself. So keep going. Until, you know, and that's where you get the sense of meaninglessness. That's where you get the sense of, well, you know, I'm going to have a bottle of wine every night because why the fuck not? Doom scrolling, nothing matters. Again, getting by, that sense of getting by. We're gods. Gods shouldn't be getting by. Gods, goddesses, divine beings, alien earth beings. Gods should not be getting by. But you're going to be getting by as long as you're not concerned about yourself. And I'm trying to tell you that you have to look honestly about why you're participating in reality the way that you are. If you're stressed, what are the things stressing you out, and why are you in stressful relationship with them? What are you getting out of that? You know, it's a radical idea to posit, or rather, it's that I maintain that we are getting some need met by the negative realities and versions of self that we participate in. If I'm in a role that stresses me out, there's something I'm getting about identifying with the version of myself that is always stressed because of this role. Nothing is by accident, nothing is by coincidence, and nothing is random. The things in your life that you don't want to be there, there's some version of you that continues participating in that. But because you keep participating in it, it keeps appearing. And because it's unpleasant, then you have the illusion of being a victim to these things. And that illusion is seemingly very real, particularly if it goes on for a long period of what we conceptualize as time. Then it seems that this is never going to end. And then we're in the throes of something that is never going to end. And how emotionally stimulating is that story? Maybe not positively, but emotional stimulation is emotional stimulation. So with that, rounding out this transmission of Divine Within, there's a difference between selfishness and self-concern. But because of group tribal, ape monkey brain, because of evolutionary psychology, and because the only collective ideal that we have for someone who's self-concerned is a narcissist, we're living in a cultural paradigm that has convinced us unconsciously that any level of concern about the self, even if that concern about the self is blatantly obvious and is driving the majority of our behaviors and relationships, even when it is actually there, it cannot be identified with. And because it cannot be identified with, when the attempt to self-care, the attempt to be self-concerned is active, it's active unconsciously, it's active in the shadow, which means we have no idea how it's operating. And we would deny its operation in the first place, again, because we're not aware of that which it is. And because we're not aware of it, we don't know how to moderate it, and we can't do anything about the consequences that it has to our being, to our soul, to our body, to our mind, and to our idea of ourselves. So when we bring up self-concern and say, yes, fuck yes, I should be filled with myself. Fuck yes, I should be concerned with myself. Why should I not be concerned about myself if everything comes out of me, if everything is a version of me, or even just on a standard level of standard shit, if I'm expected to participate and be a leader in my life and engage in my reality with me, why the hell should I not be concerned about the person doing the engaging, who is me? That is self-concern. Selfishness happens when self-concern is operating in a way that is unconscious. Okay, you can consciously hurt people. I know I have. But is operating in a way that is hurting people consciously or unconsciously. And that's going to be the pattern. That's going to be how you get your needs met, until you just say, yes, I need to be concerned about myself. There's nothing wrong with being concerned about myself. Me being concerned about myself is not inherently taking. It's not inherently selfish. I'm not inherently harming someone. I'm not inherently taking away from someone simply because I'm choosing to pour into myself. And it's crazy. If you start staying inside and you stop telling everybody about your private life, and you stop posting on social media, people are around you, and I've experienced this. They're actually going to get pissed. They're going to think something's wrong with you. They're going to think you've got your nose up. They're going to think something changed you. They're going to think that you're too good. They're going to, wonder what got into you. And it's like, I'm not hurting anybody simply because I don't want to sit around the water cooler and talk about bullshit and spill all my beans and have everybody talk about my beans and give me opinions about my beans, and then I can feel good or bad about what they say about. I don't give a fuck about what they say, if it's good or bad, because I know it's on me anyway. Um, they're gonna think something. They're gonna think you got your nose up. They're gonna think you're acting funny. Now, you might have to play a social game a little bit. You might have to, if you have to participate in social circumstances. As you're becoming this, if you're remembering this new elevation of self, right? I'm not saying all people are bad. I'm not saying that. But you start paying attention to yourself, and you start closing in. And I don't mean isolation. I'm not even really talking about solitude. I'm saying you stop letting everybody be a part of how you exchange energy with yourself, how you move energy through yourself in the day. You stop giving random people access to your entire life that you just met just because. When you stop doing that, they're going to wonder what got into you. They're going to call you selfish. But you got to ask yourself, okay, is it selfish of me because I don't want to tell everybody everything? Who's hurt by that? Who is hurting? We have this idea. So that's the summary. Is you look at all this, because the only idea that we have of a type of conscious self-concern is the narcissist, we detach ourselves from that shadow as well, all the while leaving ourselves behind in the race while we're still running it. Remember to be good to yourselves and others, because everybody's just a version of you. Anyway, signing off of this transmission, I'm an entity named Lucian, and I appreciate you for co-creating this hour here with me.